All right, hello everybody. So today we are gonna do an interview of me because why not? People ask me questions about how I got into astrology or this or that about myself, or what I believe, why I believe what I believe, whatever. So why not do a live session where you get a chance to just ask me straight and get an answer right away? We'll probably look at my chart too to answer the questions, so you get some astrology mixed in with that. All right, so I'm just going to take questions in the order that they come in the YouTube chat. So welcome to all. And let's see. Go ahead and start asking those questions, my friends. Hey everybody. Let's see how many people don't come today when it's a boring topic like ask me a question about me. So I didn't take my glasses, but the question here from Setira, I can't see if there's an I there, is why is Rahu in Satabishak so awesome? Right, so let's look at this. So there you see Rahu. This is my chart. So you could see that Rahu is just at about 3 degrees Pisces. If you're using the tropical zodiac signs, then with the sidereal nakshatras, then this is going to be Satabishak, isn't it? So here's the nakshatra wheel. And you could see this Rahu is in Satabishak. So why is Rahu so awesome in Satabishak? Well, think about the nature of Satabishak. The Satabishak belongs to Varuna. Think Varuna is the original Asura. Rahu is the Asura of the planets. There's a lot of synergy there if you have Rahu in Satabishak. The Asura is with the Asura. You have, think about Varuna's story. He was the king of the heavens until Indra politicked him out. Think about Rahu's story. He was also cheated. Right? He was cheated out of the nectar, and then cut in half and thrown. He was also like, he represents the outcast, the downtrodden, the misfit, and so does Varuna. Varuna represents the overlooked king, you know what I mean, the king that's been overthrown and cast out. So they really have a lot in common. And think about Satabishak's nature. What this Nakshatra Sutra says about Satabishak is Vishva. I can't remember that word. Vishva something. Vishvakshiti. So but in English it means it meets all the space. It takes all the space and it puts it together into concrete earth. That's what Satabishak does when it functions. So think about Rahu. Rahu is very spacey. It's very expansive and big, and it likes space. It likes up. It likes out. So Satabishak also likes space and up and out. But Satabishak has the ability to take that spacey expansiveness and pull it together into concrete forms. Right? So that's why Rahu and Satabishak is so awesome. And then in my case, it's in Pisces. So it's Rahu and Pisces also. It's giving like imagination, like a wild imagination. But it's in my third house, so that's real interesting. So it's not so great for like steady, predictable, manageable desires, because it's going to make crazy, intense, unpredictable desires. But it's very good for communicating to the outcast, to the underdog, communicating to the rebellious, communicating rebellious ideas, communicating gigantic, spacey, abstract things in concrete ways. Yeah. So hopefully that addresses the first question there of why Rahu and Satabishak is so awesome. Let's see what we got for our next question. I'm just going to take them in order. I wish there was a way. There is a way to make this bigger, isn't there? Yes. So Third Eye Cleansed says, what's a moon in Revati third? Well, that's not a question about me. Haha, you got to ask a question about me. Kay says, what's my moon nakshatra? Kay, what do you think? What do you think? What does everybody think is my moon nakshatra? What could it possibly be? Well, it could have been Satabishak, because I'm so rebellious and stuff like that. But instead, I have Rahu in Satabishak. So probably I have a very prominent Rahu then, if Rahu's nakshatra is something that you might mistake for my moon nakshatra. Maybe my nakshatra could have been Kritika, because I'm pretty harsh and cut things down. But it's my Saturn which is in Kritika. And Saturn must also be a pretty prominent planet, if you would get that mistake. What else could it be? You might think, depending on what you think or who you think I am, you might think it's a Palguni, but it's not. You might think it's a Bhadrapada, but it's not. You might think it's a Chitra if you know me well, but that would be my Jupiter. But actually, my moon's nakshatra is... Drum roll, please. I'll show you. The moon's nakshatra. Well, if you're really good, you could... It's hard to do. It's hard to get your coordinates tropically. Because my moon is 3 degrees... Is it 3 or 5? 5 degrees Gemini. So... 5 degrees Gemini, what is that in the sidereal space? You have to subtract 24 to get what it is. It's a lot of work to do it by head compared to just using the sidereal. But anyway, here you go. You'll find that the moon is right in Rohini. So I got a Rohini moon. It's an early Rohini moon. What do you know about Rohini moon? It needs water to produce vegetation, and it's the Rohini. It's exciting, arousing, it's stimulating, it stimulates things, it makes things grow, it gets things going, it's passionate, it invigorates things, and it's productive, fruitful. Yeah. So now that moon of mine is in Gemini, so it would probably be fruitful with words, passionate with words. It's in my 6th house here. Let me show you the house chart. This is in the 6th house and it's in Gemini. So Rohini, the 6th is the house of problems, arguments, challenges. So a moon in Gemini in the 6th house is like a lot of argumentative or confrontational conversation. Right? And then in Rohini, it's like pretty flowery or opulent or abundant in how it's done. So look at my YouTube videos. And you'll see that there was at least a good period of time, something must have been activating my moon, where that was just all that was going on, right? I was just like defending the tropical zodiac concept like a madman. Okay, let's see what the next question is. Yeah, Babuchka Day says, hi Vic, how did you get inclined so much in Vedic science? God only knows. I mean, all right, let's try to answer this from my chart first to show you an idea of maybe why. How would you predict that this person would be interested in such a thing, right? So, you see in this, when you eyeball a chart like this, if you see that the Kendras are empty, except for one planet, then even if you don't do the math and the calculations, you have really good odds of being correct to say that that planet that's alone in the Kendra is probably the most important planet in the chart. Especially if that planet's in the 10th house. If there's no planets in the Kendras, but you got a planet alone in the 10th house, then probably, of course, the math might have proved you wrong in a specific case, but the general rule of thumb is that planet alone in the 10th house with no other planets in the Kendra is the dominant planet in that chart. So, this person is probably a person who's interested in something that Jupiter would get interested in, which doesn't necessarily mean Vedic science or Vedic religion, but it's certainly one of the possibilities of Jupiter. Another, maybe it's law, maybe it's just morals, it could be social work, depending on the rest of the stuff in the chart, but certainly religion and philosophy is one of the main things if Jupiter is prominent. And then also I think it's because if you're thinking about what I do and what I've done, it's mostly a spiritual, religious tone to it. So if you look where the 10th Lord is gone, the 10th Lord is in the 9th house. And so that means that the career would be involved in religion and philosophy. So this guy's got the prominent Jupiter. Jupiter is the most prominent planet. Jupiter is about philosophy, religion, advising people. It's got the 10th Lord in the 9th house. The 9th house is about advising people, philosophizing, ideas, maybe education. Jupiter is also about education. So it happens I'm a teacher. I teach astrology. I've also I've been an English teacher, all kinds of stuff. I've been even like a programming teacher. So that's how you narrow it down, and then you see, all right, this guy's got K2 with Venus, so it's probably more of a spiritual thing than a religious thing. And especially if you see that the rising sign is Capricorn, so it's not a very faith-oriented rising sign. So it's probably not like he's not like involved in a church or a temple in a social sense, but he's probably involved in some kind of sciencey, personal mysticism, meditation thing. Okay, and then if also since it's K2 in the 9th house, it's also quite likely that the religion or whatever it is that he's into, isn't expected for his cultural birth. It's unexpected. So if Rahu or K2 is involved with the 9th house, then you can expect that they would be heterodox, which means like unconventional to their customary cultural milieu of what they were born into. And if it's K2 in the 9th house, you expect the person is pretty much obsessed with ancient things. If it's Rahu in the 9th house, then they're going to be more into like new religions. So that shows you now the practicals of how I personally did it. How did I get involved in Vedic stuff? Well, gosh, the earliest memory that the earliest thing that I remember is my dad talking to my grandma. I was sitting at my grandmother's table, kitchen table, which was a happy place to be, and everybody was sitting around there. My dad was talking to my grandma about the universe and trying to get her to answer the question of what's beyond the edge of the universe, what's beyond the edge of infinity. And I was just so taken by the whole concept and trying to visualize it in my mind. And that was the first time that I remember knowing that, like, this is something that I'm passionate about. These kind of ideas and things. Space. And as I was growing up, I was totally into astronomy. I had planets all over my room, built the planets, hung them up in my garage. I was totally into ancient things, magic, and all that stuff. Got really into Lord of the Rings, got into trying to learn the actual language in the Lord of the Rings, which is suspiciously looks a lot like Sanskrit. And then I wound up getting into music. I got into because of the prominence of my Rahu and Satyabhishak, I was never a mainstream person. So I never got into I was in Little League when I was 7, but I never got into mainstream sports or the regular things boys do and all that junk. I was into skateboards, and then I got into punk rock. And then from punk rock, I got exposed to bands that were into weird stuff. And one of the bands was into Hare Krishna. This was a band called the Cro-Mags. So that was what the hell? And they were a heavy metal band that was into the Hare Krishnas, which are flower power people. So it was pretty interesting. I wanted to figure that out. And from that, I got some books from the Hare Krishnas, and that was my dad. That was the book that answered all the questions that my dad was asking at that kitchen table. And it was also the book that had the real language from Lord of the Rings in it. So I was immediately addicted to it. Wound up becoming Hare Krishna like 2 years later. And then spent, God, like 8 years living in the temples as a practicing brahmachari, which means like just living in the temple, no normal social intercourse, especially no sexual stuff, no dating, nothing like that. And then, then after that I got married. And then several years after marriage, I was unhappy with my career, which was computer programming. It was so boring. So my wife said, all right, you should be a Vedic astrologer. You already know all your Vedic stuff, so just learn astrology. And then I picked that up pretty quick. It was also like, oh yeah. It was also one of those things where it's like somebody shows you, hey, you left your keys over here, and then you just go and pick up your keys. All right, that was a long answer. Hope you liked it. Let's see what else we got here. I got a kiss from the Night of Owls. David Bay says, will you be attending the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference? I probably will be attending it on the fringe because I didn't get invited to do anything at it. So I don't want to waste a bunch of days there, but I do want to show up and see a couple of people. So I'm probably going to stay down the road at a less expensive hotel and spend like maybe 1 or 2 less days there than normal, but I am planning to show up. And David is also asking what my thoughts are for the conference this year. I just want to hear, I'm a huge fan of Eve, so I'm just going to, that's my main thing. Like, I just wanted to hear what she's going to say. The rest of it, I'm not a conference goer, I'm not a socializer. It's tiring for me to socialize in large groups. I love to socialize in more smaller groups. And I don't find the lecture presentation format to be a very effective way of transmitting knowledge anyway. So I just really basically go there to touch base with people. Let's see what else we got here. April. Well, let's see what the next questions are. Do you consider what effects does your Venus... Oh, this is a very nice question here. Monica Barbosa. What effects does your Venus debilitated have in your 9th house conjunct to Ketu? This is such a good question. I like this one. Oh, and April, do you have another good question? I'm going to take that one next. What's the hardest part of practicing astrology? As in, what's the toughest part? Okay, good. Let's talk about this. What effects does the Venus debilitated in the 9th house have? Well, what do you think Venus debilitated has in its bag of tricks? Well, when a planet gets debilitated, it's not able to function right. It's like when you have a bad day, like if you don't sleep enough, or if you have your hormones going the weird way that day. So you're not going to be able to function it. You're not going to be able to be you. You'll be you, but you won't be able to, like if you're really hungry. That's also a good way to put what debilitation does to a planet. It's like you when you're like, you need to eat and you can't get food. So you start to just not be able to perform right. And you also get snappy and irritable. So that's what happens to a planet when it's debilitated. Debilitated is an English word has been around, but the older words are like fall and nicham. Nicha means to fall, to be low. And ucha, exalted, means to be high. So it's really like if you're feeling high or if you're feeling low. When you feel low, you act low. When you feel high, you act generous. Because you already have a surplus of happiness, so it's easy to give. When you're feeling low, then you're needy, so you're more interested in taking. So what does the debilitation do to a planet? Well, it's different. Each planet debilitates in its own way. malefics debilitate, especially categorically, malefics will debilitate differently than benefics. Malefics are very strong. So when they debilitate, they become really harsh and rough. Benefics are very generous and faithful and trusty. So when they debilitate, they become kind of like impotent. They become kind of like, they lose their edge. So specifically, and then that's just a general about benefics and malefics, but each planet is specific in how it debilitates or exalts. So Venus, when Venus debilitates, see what Venus really has is sensual or sensual acuity. That's one of the key things of Venus. It's alertness in the senses. Venus really represents the shukram, the glow, the light that's in your perceptions or your experience of the world. So when Venus debilitates, you'll find that a person will lose their discrimination on sensual matters. So there'll be, it's really not so bad though. I mean, it can be bad, but it doesn't have to be a very bad thing. It's actually kind of nice to not have discrimination on sensual matters because it's easier, you're not picky. But since it's a debilitation, depending on what the overall dignity is, you can make your interpretation of how far it actually goes bad or not. But since it's debilitation, you could expect that Venus debilitated would be, hey, you're not picky enough. You're just taking anything that comes your way. So you're eating this food that's almost spoiled and then you're going to get sick. Just stop and find the good food. Wait a little bit and get the good food. Or any person that crosses your eyes looks like a potential mate. Just come on, be a little more picky, be a little more discriminating. So let's see. The full calculation on my Venus is 53% dignity. So even this is where you got to think about the basic concept in Vedic astrology of Nich Bhanga, which is that even though a planet is debilitated or exalted, overall it may not actually be debilitated or exalted. And the best way to think about that, rather than following a checklist of rules, the best way to think about it is to calculate something called the Varga dignity. The dignity through all the harmonic charts, through all the divisionals, through all the amshas. Pile up the dignity and see what the overall dignity is. Average it up. So this is a debilitated Venus in my chart, but she has an okay dignity. It's over 50. 50 is neutral. So it's not going to produce bad effects. It's mostly like ready to love anybody, ready to like anybody, but not so discriminating. So it's not going to be very careful. Okay. Then it's in the 9th house. So Venus in the 9th house. Venus in the 9th house is the philosophy of love. So with Venus in the 9th house, you expect a person to have a bhakti nature, where their concept of morality is based on love. That love is the morality. It's not a rules-based morality. It's not an enforcement-based morality or a discipline-based morality. Like if you have Jupiter in the 9th house, it could be more like a law-based morality, or an idea-based morality, ideological. Mars or Saturn. Mars is like a discipline-based morality. Jupiter, I already said Jupiter. Saturn in the 9th house is discipline also, or like actual logic, practicality, pragmatic morality. Venus in the 9th house is a love-based morality. So that's what you expect. And then it's with Ketu. So you're going to expect that it's like a spiritual love, or it's a very psychological love. Venus and Ketu together, first of all, you're going to expect psychology. Psychological, the person's, what they enjoy is psychology, what they enjoy is the mind, what they enjoy is the inner things. Because Venus is what you enjoy, what's beautiful. So they enjoy it on the inner level more than on an outer level. And then Venus with Ketu in the 9th house is really like a bhakti. This is bhakti. This is spiritual love as the religion. Then I want to say one more thing about Ketu and Rahu in a trine or an angle. You always should be aware that according to all of the ancients or the classical astrologers, Rahu and Ketu in a Kendra or a Kona in an angle or a trine can form Raja Yoga, which means an excellence, can indicate great excellence. So the rule is, if you have Rahu or Ketu in a trine, then they'll indicate great excellence or Raj Yoga if they're with a angle lord. So that's the case. This chart illustrates it. Here's Venus with Ketu in the 9th house. So that means Ketu is in an angle. It's in the 9th house. And Venus owns Libra and Taurus. So Venus does own... I'm sorry. They're in a trine. Venus owns Libra and Taurus. So that means Venus owns both a trine and an angle. So Venus owns an angle. So you got a planet who owns an angle in a trine with a node. That makes Raja Yoga. So that's another indication that, hey, this person's got Jupiter in the 10th house as the most prominent planet. 10th Lord is in the 9th house. They have Raj Yoga in the 9th house. It's conjoined Ketu. This person is the ripe candidate for being the kind of guy that gets into some ancient philosophy really deeply as their career path. All right. Next question. What's the hardest part of practicing astrology? For me, the hardest part of practicing astrology. There's 3 parts that are hard. The first part is not getting exhausted. It's actually really hard not to get exhausted, because the work is so intellectually and spiritually and emotionally intense. Just to interpret a chart, it's so intense that it makes you exhausted. So the hardest part about practicing astrology is not to burn out. And then the other reason why it's intense, it blurs into the second thing that's really hard. It's emotionally hard to be an astrologer because the people that you're dealing with are real people. It's not like, of course, a lot of astrologers just shut this off and pretend that they're not dealing with real people. But I don't want to do that, because then you get, who wants to go to a doctor that treats you like you're not a real person? So the thing is, when you deal, that's why it's another reason why, that's why it's emotionally exhausting to be an astrologer, because you're becoming a part of everybody's life. And it's just like a huge responsibility. Emotionally, it pulls you. So, and then what's the third thing? I forgot. The third thing is just the stress. It's another reason of why it's so intense is that because these are real people, and they expect to get some real helpful knowledge from you. It's like high pressure. It's a high pressure job. So it's a very intellectually intensive and a high pressure job, an emotionally involving job. So my pill, my miracle drug, my advice for people that want to be an astrologer, or at least what works for me, is you have to forget the chart and the person as soon as you can. So, you really should forget it. Like, when I do a reading for a person, I want to be there 100% for the person. I want to get involved in that person's life, emotions, etc. I don't want to be cold or distant at all. But as soon as that reading is done, I'm done. I'm not going to remember anything about you, your chart, or anything. So don't even worry about me, like, talking to your best friend about what you told me, because I'm not even going to remember it, because that's my self-defense. That's my psychic defense. So that's my advice there. That's the toughest part about being an astrologer, but the great part about being an astrologer is it's just so interesting. And for me, particularly, because you can see my chart. And then also, you get to meet people. I like to meet people. I say I'm not a social person, but like I gave a caveat that I like to socialize intimately. So I like to meet people. I like to know people. I like to hear about people's lives. It's super interesting. It's also an interesting communion with the divine, because you constantly see how there's no chances in life. Everything is moving under a will. So you constantly see that again and again. It's a beautiful thing. And it's the opportunity to be of service to people is also a beautiful thing. So those are the wonderful things about astrology, or being an astrologer. Let's see what the next question is. How long? Melanie says, oh, I lost it. Wait, I'm sorry, I lost this. How long after someone orders a birth chart report do they get it? I ordered one yesterday. Hey, Melanie, I'll send it to you soon. It will take, depending on when you order it, if it's just the report, which is like victorcara.com/R2, then it can take anywhere between like, sometimes if you just get the timing really right, it might be like 3 hours. Or it might, if you get the timing really bad, like you order it on a Friday night and then I have a really busy weekend with my family or something, then it might be 2 days, 2.5 days. But usually it's about a day. I try to get them all done in a day. Then, of course, the other readings, like if you order something where I'm actually communicating with you directly, that takes longer, usually 2 weeks. All right. Nadak. Any plans to visit New Jersey? New Jersey is like my home away from home. But I have no plans. You gotta help me make one, okay? Help me make a plan. Third eye clients, can you transcend astrology? So, and then third eye clients gives their own answer, which is the answer is yes. You can transcend astrology, but you can also climb Mount Everest. But can you? I mean, you can climb Mount Everest, but can you? So you can transcend astrology, but can you? Well, you're going to have to get up and get off your ass and do it. It's just like if you want to climb Mount Everest, you better start freaking exercising, man. So if you want to transcend astrology, you're not going to get it by smoking joints and hanging out and eating bagels. You're going to get it by some serious meditation. You're going to have to take shelter of yoga and meditation. Or, yeah, you're going to have to become really serious about taking control of your emotions and how you react to stimulus. If you can't take control of how you react to stimulus, then you'll always react in a predictable manner to the stimulus. And the stimulus is already set. It's destined based on your previous action. So based on your previous action, you're going to get an experience. Now, if you don't have control of your emotional reactions, then you're going to react to that experience also in a predictable manner, and the momentum is simply going to build, and you won't transcend astrology. It'll be like trying to transcend a boulder that's coming down a mountain and it's falling on top of your head. But can it be done? Yes. Is it often done? No. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yati siddhaye yadatam api siddhanam kaschid yo veti kaschin yomam veti tatvata. It can be done. You can know the absolute. You can know Krishna. You can be there with Krishna. But who does it? Krishna says out of thousands of people, maybe one person even tries. Out of thousands of people who try, maybe one person really succeeds. But, so you'll just say, well, then it's too hard, I'm not going to try it. Well, good. Then you'll be satisfied with, the little crumbs that are on the floor in life. But if you really want the feasts, you're going to try this. You're going to try to liberate yourself from emotional pre-programming so that you can actually exhibit your true form, your true nature, your true personality. Let's see. Sharon Q, is your ascendant sun moon always different in Western than Vedic? Okay, that's not about me, but it's really easy to answer this. Vedic astrology does not, the majority of Vedic astrologers use a sidereal zodiac. However, that is not the definition of the zodiac in Vedic astrology, so there is a minority of Vedic astrologers who use the tropical zodiac. So your question really should be, is your ascendant, sun, and moon always different in sidereal than in tropical? And the answer, of course, is yes, because they're two different systems. Third eye cleanse. Okay, and actually Third Eye Cleanse gave a good more clear answer that they're not always going to be different because they're only 24 degrees off instead of 30 degrees off. Let me see if you got any more questions about me. Nature's Reality said, I heard Eve say that Venus is not debilitated in Chitra. You see, so this is another principle. The way that the nakshatras and the signs overlap is interesting. Now let me see what she's talking right now, because you never know if she's talking sidereal or tropical because she's Mrigashirsha. Let's see. She has that nature like a Mrigashirsha deer. She does everything at once. So she's saying Chitra in Virgo, so she's talking sidereal. So what she's really trying to tell you people is, if your Venus is in Chitra, it's really not debilitated because actually it's in Libra, but she's not saying that part because she doesn't like to make waves. All right. Let me see what else you got. How does your Sun, Mars, Mercury conjunction... see, this is a good question too. Setra says, how does your Sun, Mars, Mercury conjunction in the 8th house Leo influence the way you approach occult knowledge? See, this is also something I should have touched on for sure in that first question about astrology and Vedas and all that. I'm sorry, I didn't have this on the screen. So you see how Chitra now is actually not in Virgo, it's in Libra. All right. So the question is about this combo that I have in the 8th house. If somebody's wanting to know why I'm so into Vedic astrology and everything, it would also be pretty obvious. See, not only is it obvious, like, okay, the guy's really into Vedic philosophy and helping people, coaching people, but specifically it goes to astrology. It's just, you could see with Ketu and Venus in the 9th house, specifically it's going to go towards spirituality and occult. But how does it get all the way to astrology? We'll look at the 8th house. If you ever want to know anything about astrology, you got to look at the 8th house. And then think about Mercury and Ketu also a bit. So this 8th house has its own lord. And then it has Mars. And it has Mercury, the 9th lord. So there's a synergy of Mercury, the planet of the astrologer, in the 8th house, the house of the astrologer. That's one thing. The fact that Mercury is the 9th lord also means that the fact its conjunction with Mars constitutes a Raja Yoga, because Mercury is the 9th lord, that's an angle. Mars is the 4th lord. That's I'm sorry, I always get this angle and trine in English mixed up. Mercury is the 9th lord. That's a trine. Mars is the 4th lord. That's an angle. The Kendras are the angles, the Konas are the trines. So the combination of a Kendra and a Kona lord makes significant, a Raj Yoga, which means, hey, there's significant power here. That conjunction is not very close, however, but it's still a Raj Yoga. Then you have Mars and the Sun. They're really close to each other. So Mars is the 4th lord. So you got the 4th and the 9th conjoined with the 8th lord in the 8th house. So it's like, well, what was the question specifically? But this is really like, hey, there's power in the 8th house in addition to the Jupiter that's so prominent and the Venus that's so prominent. This person could be an astrologer. It wasn't always an astrologer. Right? Didn't happen in 2007. But I've always been a philosopher. So it's the Jupiter and the Venus thing is more prominent in this chart than the 8th house. But still, the 8th house really gets in there and supports it. How does it influence how I approach it? That's also, what do you think? You got Mars and the Sun. So those are masculine. There's all the masculinity is in the 8th house. So it's all concentrated there in the 8th house. So it's going to be a very independent approach to how I study the occult. Right, so you'll find in the history of my life, I never fit in with the big group, with the guru group, with anything like that. I'm not in the ACVCA, BCD, or the BHAVA, HIJ, or the ISR, or anything like that. Any of these organizations or groups. I'm just like an independent guy who does things my own way and learns things my own way, etc. Mercury in Leo tends to be self-taught anyway, out of the box. That's your out-of-the-box interpretation of Mercury in Leo. So you got Mercury in Leo with the Sun and Mars. So super self-taught. Everything is self-taught. And it's in the 8th house. So what subject is it teaching or learning? Occult, astrology, mysticism. I already answered this one. Shuvraji. What's my birth nakshatra? It's Rohini and the ascendant nakshatra. I didn't answer that one. Want to have a look? The ascendant nakshatra. I'll show you it on the wheel since it's hard to figure it out. Well, here's an example of how you can figure it out pretty easy. If you have a tropical coordinate like 25 degrees Capricorn as the ascendant, then just subtract about 24, so it's like 1 degree Capricorn is the sidereal equivalent. And then that's an easy way to map to nakshatras if you're used to using sidereal zodiac. So you could probably guess which one it's going to be. What I do is I just have a separate nakshatra wheel. So my ascendant is pretty firmly in the middle of Uttarashada. So that's also going to give that confidence. You see, if you got, what's Uttarashada's sutra? Uttarashada's sutra is it needs mastery so that it can give guidance. And then it's the Jupiter thing. The Jupiter is the most prominent planet in the 10th house. The 10th lord is in the 9th house in the Raj Yoga. And then he's got an Uttarashada ascendant. So he's going to be a coach, a guide, a teacher. Not going to be easy to fit me into the student role. I wish that wasn't as true as it is, but it's not going to be easy to fit me into the student role because I have Mercury in Leo, all that stuff in Leo in the 8th house. I'm doing my own exploration, and it's just more natural for me to... Actually, I master the subject by teaching it and by explaining it. The effort to verbalize it in a way that somebody else would understand it makes me understand it so much more clearly. That's a very Uttarashada trait. And then if you put the moon, you see I have the moon in the 6th house in Gemini. So it's a lot of argumentative speech. And with the Uttarashada ascendant, then you got, a guy that's not afraid to fight, but not with fists, but with ideas and words and things, Gemini things. Or not only Gemini, but all this Jupiter and 9th house stuff. So he's not afraid to... Uttarashada is not afraid to fight. It's a war nakshatra. The Ashadas are war nakshatras. But, so you see what I'm saying? So I'm going to fight on that. And Moon in Rohini and Uttarashada ascendant, you can do various interpretations with that. Various ways, like how does it affect the personality? It's pretty confident, creativity and stuff like that. Let's see what else you got. Why do you live in Japan? Marina asks. Marina, the reason why I live in Japan, let's look at it in my chart. You see that I keep going to the importance of Jupiter, right? This is what you should do with any chart. When you've calculated what the prominent planet is, look how prominent my Jupiter is. So the height of the bars indicates the prominence. You can get this in your report when you get the birth chart overview report from me. You get these kind of calculations. The height of the bar. So Jupiter is way higher than everybody else, and Rahu is the second one. So when you're interpreting this chart, you got to keep going back to Jupiter, because Jupiter is the kingpin of the chart. So take a look at the Jupiter. You want to know why I live in Japan. Well, the most prominent planet is in the 10th house. One thing people overlook about the 10th house is that it's the Vyomasthana. That means the place where the wind blows. And it's opposite to the home, the 4th house. So it's a lot. There's a lot of movement. People have movement all over the houses. Ninth house, third house, all this stuff. But the 10th house and the 7th house, in classical astrology, as I have studied it, there may be other schools of classical thought, but the classical school of thought that I've studied is that the movement really comes in the 7th house, which is the western horizon, where the sun goes, and the 10th house, which is where the wind blows above your head. So my most prominent planets in the 10th house. Probably I move around a lot. What houses does this planet own? Jupiter owns Pisces and Sagittarius. Here's the symbol for Sagittarius. That's the 12th house. The 12th house is international and foreign. Right, so the most prominent planet in my chart is the 12th Lord in the 10th house. So the 12th Lord can indicate travel to foreign places, relocation, living with foreigners, and it's in the 10th house, which is the house of travel and movement. So quite likely, the person does a lot of moving around. You're not talking about a buried planet in a subchart. You're talking about the most prominent planet in the main chart. So even if it's a simple thing like 12th Lord in the 10th house, it sets the tone. Like, wow, this person can really do a lot of travel. The other thing is I have the moon in the 6th house. The 6th house is the other location of foreigners. And I have the Lord of the 4th house in the 8th house. So it indicates like not having a lot of permanent structure. The permanence, the stability is not so visible. Because the 4th house is the permanence and the 8th house is invisibility or mystery. And then my second most prominent planet was Rahu, right? You see on this graph, the second most prominent planet is Rahu. So if the most prominent planet is the 12th Lord in the 10th house and the second most prominent planet is Rahu in the 12th sign, Pisces, then, Rahu means changing, always going, and foreigners, Rahu means foreigners. So a lot of interaction with foreign people, foreign culture, whether it's India, Japan. I've been everywhere. Almost everywhere. I have never gone to Africa or Australia or Antarctica, but just about every place else I've been. So, and this is a chart that shows you tons and tons of traveling and relocation. Now, as for the practical, why did you move to Japan? My wife is half Japanese, so there's your answer. But the longer thing is, life wasn't going so rosy in America. We felt like let's change something up, and then she wanted to come live here. She has a grandfather here who was 92 at the time that we moved here, or had just turned 90 at the time that we moved here, who is one of the most awesome people that ever lived. And you could talk philosophy with him. He's a Buddhist priest, and I used to really enjoy talking to him in my broken Japanese. So we kind of moved here on a whim to be closer to him before he died. And he died 2 years ago. A little less than 2 years ago. But we're still here because it's such a safe and nice place, and our children kind of have roots here now. But we may move. My wife kind of has Croatia next on her list because she's half Japanese, half Croatian. She's from Dalmatia. So you never know, you might see us show up in Dalmatia, which is a beautiful place. Legal, right? This is not a question about me, but what the heck? Do you see any astrological evidence that the consciousness of the world is elevating? Many New Ager people are predicting a new Earth. Well, if it makes you feel good, fine. People are always predicting things for the future because everybody feels like they need hope. So fine, I'm not going to smash anybody's hope. No reason to, maybe it's true. Danny asked me who I learned astrology from. So as you can see, after we analyzed my 8th house, I probably didn't learn it from anybody specific, right? Shuvra says, I don't look like a Gemini moon. Well, that's because it's in the 6th house. It's not a typical spot for Gemini. And that's also because the moon is not a very prominent planet in my chart. It's more about Chitra. It's more about Jupiter or Rahu. The looks are going to come from there. Looks also come more from the ascendant than from the moon. Sun and Mars and Leo, oh my God. Right. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. I'm not sure if I'm skipping or not now, but Cosmic Bliss asks, oh my God. Wait, there's some good questions here. Yeah, these are good questions. These are good questions. Cosmic Bliss says, sorry if I'm skipping, but the way that this thing scrolls, the chat window isn't so helpful to me. So here's the next question that I see. Could you initially feel the shift from Rahu to Jupiter Dasha? Yeah. Definitely. It was a huge shift, but the Jupiter Dasha was chaotic as AF in its beginning. For sure, especially Jupiter, Saturn, and Jupiter, Rahu, they were nuts. And also Rahu, Jupiter was nuts. Just like in the Dasha and Bhukti of the two most prominent planets, when one of them is in Satyabhishak and the other one is the 12th Lord in the 10th house, so a lot of wild rides happen. If you could pick one astrological placement in your chart, another question from Cosmic Bliss, to have present and thus have integrated that energy in your consciousness, what would it be? If you could pick one astrological placement in your chart to like fully embrace, I think you embrace them all. I mean, this is your chart. It's not somebody else's chart. Maybe to fully like purify and make to the highest standard, which one would it be? Maybe probably Venus in the 9th house. I definitely would want to get my moon out of the 6th house. That would be a nice favor. I would love to put it in the 7th. No, 7th would be too tiring. Put that thing in the 5th, like it was in my sidereal chart. But the one that who wouldn't want to be better Venus? Venus is all about love and beauty and wonderful stuff. What do you think? Here's Anais Lake. What do you think of the Mayapur temple of the Vedic Planetarium? So for people who don't know what this is the Hare Krishna organization, ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. They have a headquarter in a part of Bengal, East India, called smallish town called Mayapur, which is a sacred town to the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They have their headquarters there. It's a huge thing. It's like a little city in this rural place full of Westerners. And they're building a gigantic kind of Western style structure that they call the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, which supposedly is on the wishes of their founder. But really, who knows? It's kind of the way that people wish the wishes of the founder were wishing, so that they had something to all work on and pour money into and do anything except be spiritual. So what I think about it, unfortunately, I think it's going to be awful, because I think that the ISKCON concept of the cosmology of the Puranas is awful. And the reason for that is that they have the wrong basic translations of some key terms like loka. See, they think of the word loka as a planet, like the planets that you look up with your eyes and you see it. Like, you ever notice that they're not called lokas, they're called grahas? And the loka is the basic word that's still active in English as location. And even in Hindi and all the languages, and even in Sanskrit, loka also just means like a community. Sublok means everybody here. So they got this really strange conception of what because of that basic fundamental mistake in thinking that when the Puranas are talking about lokas, they're talking about three-dimensional planets in three-dimensional space. They have this really wild concept of what the Vedas think about three-dimensional cosmology. If you want to know about three-dimensional cosmology, read the Surya Siddhanta. That's a three-dimensional cosmology book. If you want to know about mystical cosmology, which is not any less real than three-dimensional astrology, it's just not in light years and things like that. If you want to know about the locations and the realms of consciousness, focused on the earth, which is where consciousness is primarily playing out, then you want to study the cosmology of the Vedas. Of course, sometimes the Vedas are going to give you Jyotish cosmology, which is three-dimensional, but it'll be obvious. They'll be saying, this is how you calculate this and this and this. And they're not going to talk about lokas either, as far as I know. So I'm really not so excited to see the Vedic Planetarium finished, because it's just going to make people think that Vedic cosmology is wacky, like Bible thumping wacky. Here, Cosmic Bliss asks, with so much 8th house energy, has depression been a challenge for you? Not really, and you should be able to guess that, because what's my most prominent planet? Jupiter. And Jupiter's nature is optimism. So, but I'm not this big bouncy rabbit of optimism and fluffy love. But that's because like you say, I got a lot of stuff in the 8th house. But also I'm a Capricorn ascendant. So, but it's a good counterbalance to a Capricorn ascendant to have a prominent Jupiter, so that you don't get sucked into depression. It's not easy for you to get sucked into depression if you have a good Jupiter that's not debilitated or not bad in its overall dignity. Plus, I don't really think necessarily that the 8th house is for depression. It's for mystery. The moon's location in the 8th house may indicate depression, but it's really Saturn's influence on the moon, Ketu's influence on the moon. You could even have problems in the 3rd house, which would indicate depression, because you need to understand what depression is, too, clinically speaking. Clinically speaking, depression is the lack of desire. You see, it's so interesting how the mind works. The mind works in that it needs desires before it can feel happiness, because happiness is nothing but the fulfillment of a desire. So if you don't have any desires, it's impossible to experience happiness on an external level. And what depression is the feeling that there's nothing worth desiring, or nothing that I desire is possible for me to attain. So I might as well not get it. So that's going to happen if you have like a lot of pessimism involved with your desire machine. Your desire machine is the moon and the 3rd house. So like getting a lot of negative influence from Saturn on your moon, Ketu on the moon. I've seen people with the moon sandwiched in between Ketu and Saturn who have sudden bouts of severe depression. Things like that. It's not necessarily if they're in the 8th house or not, in my experience. Let me scroll and see, this is an awful scrolling thing. Maddie asked for the Inside Out reunion. It's not going to happen. I'll do it. Ashley, this is an interesting question. Ashley's question is, what time is it? Oh, so the hour is up. Let me answer a few more questions. Are you lacking in the water element because the only planet in a water sign is Rahu? If you do the calculation really simple like that, then yeah. Let's see what the calculation is that I do. I'll show you this. This is also from the regular report that I offer on my website. I give you these graphs. Where are they? So here's a balance of nakshatra types. Here's a balance of the elements. So it's actually strange. What I do for this calculation is, first of all, not every planet is worth the same amount of weight. My Jupiter is my most prominent planet, so it's going to be worth more elemental weight. Its element is of more consequence than Venus, which is the least weighty planet. That's one thing. And then the second thing is the 12 zodiac signs on the Rashi chart, the basic birth chart, are not the only signs the planet is exposed to. It's exposed to all the signs, the Amsha signs by degree. So when you factor all these in, you get this computation graph of elemental balance. So it's depicted in two ways. The first one is this up on the top, which is just like a pie chart that's not round. So you would just see like, okay, he's mostly earth. And then actually the next most is water. So it's pretty fertile, actually. There's a lot of earth and water, so he's probably a healthy guy. Doesn't get sick that often. He's okay. Earth and water are also more feminine, so it's probably more sensitive than your average dude, because he's prominently an earth and water person. So, you might be thinking this guy's got no intuition at all. He's only got Rahu in Pisces, no other water signs. When you come up with all the stuff, you see, no, the water's pretty high, and it's actually air that's real low. So this guy is not really having a lot of fun. Somebody needs to let this guy lighten up. So he's so damn serious and intense and doing his work, especially with the Capricorn ascendant and all that. So that's the answer about the Rashi elements. Setra show us the D9. Let me just show you my D9. It's a little embarrassing. I'm going to show you all the private charts here. The D9, here's all the Varga charts that come in the report. D9's here. Look, I have a nice D9. Do you like it? We have it's a Leo D9. So this is an interesting thing too. The ascendant for the Navamsha is Leo. The ascendant for the main chart is Capricorn. Leo and Capricorn, that's a huge clash, but with authority figures. So there's another thing. Like Rahu in Satabhishek is very prominent in the chart. Jupiter's in the 6th house. It's the Leo Amsha within Capricorn. This guy is going to clash with the establishments. So here, you can see some interesting stuff in here. Here's another sign of doing a lot of moving. Is the 12th Lord is in the 4th house. The 4th Lord is in the 10th house. The 1st Lord is even in the 10th house. There's some leadership there in this Navamsha chart, but there's also a lot of arts and stuff, because these two nice benefics are in Gemini in the 11th. Here's my Navamsha. Here you might think, oh, the moon is in Scorpio, he's depressed. No, the moon's in Scorpio. It's in the 4th house, likes to be in the 4th house, so it's deep. With Mercury, can't really always express the way he feels. Rahu in the 12th. 6th Lord in the 12th, another sign of a lot of international movement. Let's see, what other questions you got? Let's do 2 more questions. Three. If someone has the same ascendant in the basic chart and the D9 chart, it's called Vargotam. It's a very sweet thing. It's a nice thing because there's synergy. Let's see. I don't know anything about Bhrigu Bindu. Do I feel like John Barker? Do I feel like a heretic or an apostate? Would your Rahu in the 3rd house invoke that perception? You see, I don't feel like a heretic or apostate, but I look like a heretic and apostate. So let's suss that out. See, why don't I feel like a heretic and apostate? Because I got Jupiter as my main planet, and it's in Chitra, which is interested in Satyam and Nritam, according to the Nakshatra Sutra. Right, so I'm just looking for the truth, which is what the originators of all the traditions were looking for. I don't feel like an apostate. But the thing about my chart is it's not that I'm really a heterodox or not. The thing about of course, it's a little bit heterodox because I got a node in the 9th house. But the real thing in my chart is this guy clashes with authorities. So whether that makes me apostate or whatever the other word was, from the point of view of the organization, definitely I'm the guy that you want to ban from your property. But from my point of view, I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to help you be the thing that you want it to be, that you claim to be. Let's see, one more question. I'm not going to share any mystical experiences. But what do you think if I have K2, Raj Yoga with K2 in the ninth house and all that stuff in the 8th house? But there's definitely more mystical charts than mine. Because you see, the thing is, my basically my rising sign is Capricorn. So what is Capricorn? The basis of this chart is pragmatic. It's not mystical. It's not a Pisces rising sign, or even a Scorpio or a Cancer or something. So there's not a lot. It's not over the top with visualization and abstraction. There's a lot of fundamental pragmatism and practicality in this chart. So it's not really going towards like peyote experiences and LSD and mysterious, mystical stuff. All right. Wait, I just saw Matishka's name. Did she ask a question? Matishka, have you ever thought about marketing your astrology software? I did think about that, Matishka. I don't think it's a good marketing move. And also, I don't think it's going to be a very easy thing to do at all, because it's not in a portable language right now. So if somebody can convince me that it's business-wise in my favor, and then if somebody can convince me that it's doable without me having to spend 6 months doing it, then I would do it. All right, my friends. Thanks so much. Angela, thank you. So that's it. This is pretty fun, right? I was amazed how many of you guys showed up. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. We'll figure out what the topic will be next week. Maybe more chart analysis stuff, maybe musicians or something like that. All right, my friends. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.